Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, I spoke with the USPS in January of this year and wrote a letter to you in February expressing serious concerns with the transfer of mail operations from the Buffalo Processing and Distribution Center to the Northwest Rochester Processing and Distribution Center. My constituents and I shared serious concerns about USPS's claims that these operational changes will enhance on-time delivery rates and reduce delivery times. Simply put, forcing mail sent to and from addresses in Buffalo, New York to be processed through the Rochester Processing and Distribution Center over an hour and a half away introduces numerous opportunities for delay. As expected, your test sites in Atlanta, in Houston, Richmond, Virginia, they all reported delays, with USPS attributing them to bad weather and other factors. Mr. DeJoy, Western New York is no stranger to severe weather, especially in our winter months as we're experiencing now, which frequently disrupts travel. Just last week, a snowstorm shut down parts of the New York State Thruway and led to travel bans and advisories throughout Erie and Chautauqua counties. My constituents are rightfully worried that under your modernization plan, they will not receive their critical medications, their important packages, or even bills on time. So, Mr. DeJoy, considering the frequent severe weather disruptions in regions like Western New York, what specific changes or improvements are you planning to implement under your modernization plan to ensure timely mail delivery, especially during adverse weather conditions?
So, with regard to the transfer of the mail processing, the outgoing mail processing from Buffalo to Rochester, that was a totally different process that we went on in Richmond and Atlanta. Atlanta and Richmond were completely built new plants and a consolidation of a bunch of local operations. We have since announcing that looked at the whole. There was like 60 plants that were in this cancellation, canceling outgoing mail. We have gone about it a different way now and filed a 3661 to deal with the mail differently. And some of these plants we're not going to move the original cancellation, and Buffalo happens to be one of them. So that mail will stay in Buffalo, and we're going to deploy other practices to aggregate and consolidate mail, outgoing mail. So you will still receive that local turnaround cancellation.
Yeah, I am grateful that that plan was scrapped, but it was of great concern. My constituents aren't just worried about the absurdity of local mail traveling hundreds of miles to reach a destination perhaps 2 miles away. They're also alarmed by your plan to outfit the Postal Service's fleet of electric vehicles. Mr. DeJoy, this may not be an electric vehicle hearing, but let's be clear. Sending electric mail delivery vehicles to rural communities, which I represent, in the dead of winter is a disaster waiting to happen. You're going to leave my constituents stranded without their mail when these vehicles break down in freezing temperatures, and worse, you'll end up spending more on gas-powered rescue vehicles to save them. So nevertheless, the post office received federal funding for electric vehicles and charging stations through the Inflation Reduction Act. Do you plan to maintain a fleet of gasoline-powered vehicles to service rural routes?
We have extensive studies with regard to the temperature deviations that we can withstand. And there's a relatively small portion. Of our routes, I think 20% or less, that we would not put these vehicles in. We look at every route with regard to whether it needs four-wheel drive or two-wheel drive, whether it can use a left-hand drive or a right-hand drive. So we have diagnostics on every single route in the country, and we will use that information appropriately to deploy the type of vehicle that we deploy. And we have many emergency backup procedures that are put in all of our locations. So I think I'm pretty certain that we will deploy these vehicles, and they will be more effective than the old vehicles that we have that are breaking down every place.
Boy, I hope you're right. I want to use my remaining time here to discuss a district-related issue. The town of Woodhull, New York, a very small rural town in my district with a large Amish community, has been waiting for over 3 years for the post office to reopen. Unfortunately, extreme weather during the aftermath of Hurricane Debbie, the community was once again flooded, brings this to light, the people of Woodhull and what they've, the sacrifices and the burdens that they have been stressed with over the last 3 years. Do you have any updates on the Woodhull, New York Post Office, and will you commit to working with me to ensure my constituents in Woodhull that they can get their post office reopened?
Yes, I do not have an update. I can get you an update, and I will work with you. We have many of the, we have these situations where we lease most of our post offices, and when issues happen, there's probably too much negotiation that goes on to get the post offices opening, and that's something that
3 years is a completely unacceptable timeline.
it happens. I
And-
know.
Well,
all over the
but
place.
you, sir, can fix it.
And we'll look at it.
And I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on that because this is unacceptable.
Okay.
That these people have been without a post office, having to travel 20 miles
Well-
to go to their nearest post office. It's been 3 years, and we've got nothing but the runaround from the USPS. And enough is enough. You know, you're supposed to bring business principles into the Postal Service. This is unacceptable to my constituents. And all of my colleagues here understand the importance of the U.S. Postal Service. Our constituents rely on the USPS to run as efficiently as possible, and I hope that USPS is doing everything in its power to ensure that all Americans receive their mail in a timely and efficient manner, and I really hope that you'll take some of what I had to say into account. Thank you, and I yield back.